2024 is our 1994. Let's rescue SA. Build one South Africa. Only action can fix SA. Economic freedom in our lifetime. Together we can do more. Let's do more together. Bulindlela. Pa, pa, pa. Shoot to kill. Shoot the bull. Amandla. We all know these songs and slogans and who they belong to. We know exactly what our political leaders in South Africa think and the direction in which they want South Africa to go. What is alarmingly missing in the conversation in our country is what the citizens have to say. And I'm not talking about complaining every now and then about Eskom on Twitter. I mean the real civic engagements are the solidarity that we should be having together about what we want to see happening in this country. I don't need to remind any of you about the sacrifices that have been made to make sure that we got to where we are today. That our shared ancestors, who all spilt blood on this land to ensure freedom for us, and some prosperity, whether black, white, Indian, colored, we all possess the same shared trauma in this country. And it's exacerbated by the physical remains and the structural inequality that we still see today. But we know what was done, and we know who did it to make sure that they could realize the full dreams that they had for all of us. And what I often think is that our shared trauma is not the only thing that we have inherited from our ancestors. We also share their grit, their resilience. You have to in South Africa with everything going on. Their hope and their attitude. But I think that for a very long time, we've let it lie so dormant that we may have forgotten that we have those parts of us. And we may have even thought that it was extinguished, but I do not believe that that's the case. I think we've forgotten a little bit who we are, and as a result, we've forgotten how to fight for what we want in this country. We've allowed our politicians to become celebrities, to lord over us with impunity. And every few years, we take a gamble where we choose a couple of them and we hope that they'll be better angels and that they'll do right by us. And we hope that they'll affect our lives, particularly as the middle class, which is the majority of this room, as little as possible, so that we don't have to change very much. And I think for the people that are believers in this room, there's a very interesting saying about how the devil's greatest trick that he ever played was making people believe that he didn't exist. I think our politicians' greatest trick in this country is making us think that democracy and our participation in democracy is an individual pursuit. Voting is an individual choice, but democracy is a group project. And I think that we've forgotten that as South Africans. We haven't remembered how to organize. And as a result, our democracy is at great risk. We failed to fundamentally understand that to create change, we have to do it together, even if it starts small in our different communities. Hey, girl. And the truth is that after 1994, we felt so euphoric. We were so smug about the fact that we were this great nation reborn, the only one in modern history that had gone to liberation without some kind of civil war, that we outsourced our democracy and we outsourced the work, mainly to the IEC, but in particular to political parties. But democracy does require work. The best democracies, well, depending on what you think of that now in the current world, but the best democracies are not the ones that have the best politicians that make the best economic decisions and have the best economies. The best democracies are the ones that have the most active citizens who are able to hold their politicians to account and are able to make them do what the citizens actually want. And we don't have that in South Africa. After 94, we hoped that the IEC would do the kind of work of civic education that we needed. and we hoped that political parties would actually fulfill their promises. And as a result, we forgot to organize, and now we sit in a state of paralysis, where when the water bursts outside our house, we panic because we don't know what to do. When we have no electricity, or when we have real crises in our wards, we don't know what to do. We hope that there'll be enough of a political counselor or a political person that can do something. But as an individual, we've outsourced it for so long that we don't know how to organize. One of the reasons is that we have no civic education in this country. The vast majority of you, I'd be willing to bet my left boob, probably don't know the difference between a UIP, an IDP, and that we have the most participatory democracy in the world that allows us to actually tell our politicians what they're meant to do. We don't know the difference between a ward councillor and a PR councillor. Some people don't even know how the president is elected. And we've really diagnosed the problem incorrectly, because we think the problem is with politicians and political parties and how they don't do anything for us. How entitled. Because why would they? Who gives power away? Especially when the people that give you the power don't even do anything after elections to hold you accountable. We need to reframe our understanding of what our civic engagements and civic duties need to be. We can't hope that politicians and political parties are going to change the way that they operate. But what we can do, which is within our power, is organize so that we, as citizens, can actually make sure that we can hold them accountable and that we can force them to do what we want them to do. And so our obsession with changing politicians and parties and niggling a little bit at whether or not they'll be better is quite frankly irrelevant, because as we sit here as South Africans, we don't even know what we should be voting for, because we don't even know what these people are supposed to do. People don't know the difference between what a department does, what a ministry does. And we sit and we all think we know so much about politics because we have a lot of opinions, but we have no real resources or tools for what happens after we've voted people in and they don't do anything. You can't recall them. If you've never seen your ward councillor, what are you going to do? And these things exist in our legislation, but we simply have not done the work to be able to actually access it. And then, of course, we blame young people. We say there's 12 million of them who haven't registered and they don't vote. But what should they be voting for? In fact, they might have the right idea, not that they shouldn't vote, but at their disgust at what has happened in our country. And at the lack of work that we have all done. I'm only 36, so I'm only taking a little bit of responsibility, but there's a lot of people in this audience that have white hair, so this falls on you a little bit. We let the team down, we let South Africa down by not ensuring that after 1994, we continued to do the work to keep our democracy alive. Instead, what we did was that we got happy that we had a little bit of economic growth, and we felt insulated in our bubbles, and the fact that we can actually have medical aid, have private school fees, and we didn't do the work that was needed. And so Afrobarometer comes out at the beginning of last year and says that 76% of South Africans would give up democracy and forego elections if there was a leader that came up and said that they could promise them jobs and security. 76% of South Africans. So many young people think that democracy is an abstract idea. The majority of them have been born into democracy, but all they've ever known is load shedding, corruption, the state of collapse continuously that they see happening in their country. They have no education, they have no opportunities. What does democracy mean to them? A suave, excellent politician who comes and says that he can give them what they want is likely to be the one that they're going to vote for. And so we have a lot of work to do around disinformation and actually making sure that people understand how our government works. But that step has to also start with us, because CEOs, doctors, business leaders in this country don't know how this government works. The average South African doesn't know what to do when things go wrong, beyond complaining on Twitter, writing some letters maybe to the Business Day or Daily Maverick, and hoping that somebody else will sort the problem out. And you cannot change something if you don't understand it. And this is why the work that we do at the Groundwork Collective, and why when I left politics, I really wanted to get back to the ground, because I realized increasingly that so many people had outsourced so much of their power to politicians. And I wanted to make sure that we could prepare our country, and in our 30 years of democracy as we celebrate today, that we could have a reset and make it not about the politicians and not about the political parties, but about us as citizens and what we want to see. Because unless we are prepared to embark from today on having some form of citizen solidarity with one another, we are going to continue to be at the mercy of party political wins. Unless we are prepared to give our money, but more importantly, actually, our time to ensuring that we protect our democracy, then we must be prepared to understand that more children are going to drown in pit latrines, drown as they go to school in rivers, fail in their education because they are so hungry that they can't concentrate. Unless we are prepared to join civic groups, to organize where we are in our communities and start small, then we must be prepared to be the rape capital of the world further, and that we must all live in fear constantly that we may die over something as trivial as somebody stealing a cell phone from us. That is the reality of what we live in, and that's what's going to continue to happen unless we, particularly as the middle class, are going to decide that we're going to be far more engaged as citizens. And that's not just about voting every 5 years, that's about what we do after voting in between elections. That's about whether or not you know that you can form a UIP in your street, take your rates back, and do what you need to do. Whether you know the legislation that enables you to be able to go to a council meeting, to actually sit at a committee in Parliament and say what you believe needs to be done. You all are people that are particularly smart. I'm sure you're smarter than the politicians I've met. And we've outsourced it to the dregs, quite frankly, in some cases, of our society, who are just smarter than us about taking opportunity and let's see how this goes. And then we are at their mercy. And so as we celebrate this 30 years and we say this is the best election we're about to have, our solidarity to one another must mean that this is enough. This 30 years must be a reset for us where we are no longer prepared to also outsource our political battles to the poor. Because what we have done as the middle class, across race, across demographics, is that we've insulated ourselves so much, whether, as I said before, healthcare or medical aid or private schooling, that we've left the political battles to poor people. They're the ones that protest on a daily basis. There's an average of 13,500 protests in South Africa every single day. And I'm pretty sure most of you haven't been to more than 2. Who are the people that are trying to get their government to listen to them? And who are the people that can least afford to actually be away from their families, their homes, because they have to focus on bread and butter issues? Whilst we sit at the Daily Maverick gathering and feel good about ourselves because we listen to a couple of political leaders. We cannot outsource our political fighting and our political battles to the poor alone anymore. We need a culture change in this country, and that also means that it's going to take some time. We're also very impatient as South Africans. We want the best political leader. He must tick all our boxes. He must be charismatic, or she, but I mean, we have a bias against that in South Africa, so he must be charismatic, nice, affable, smart, can sing. And if they don't do one of those things, oh, he's boring. He's not going to get the vote. He's not this, he's not that. We have an impatience of understanding that to change the behavior that we have allowed to continue for 30 years is going to take some time. And so we hate the status quo of the political parties that we have, but we also are so critical of anybody new who says, I would like to raise my hand up, could you please vote for me? We want them to jump through so many hurdles and hoops before we think that they are worthy of our vote. And unless we're prepared to stick with what we want, I'd encourage us to maybe look at some new ones. And it's the same for the way that we do our civic engagement. Maybe you're a Maverick subscriber, maybe you donate to the SPCA. But what do you do beyond that? What do you do with your time to actually make sure that you protect the democracy that has been so hard fought for in South Africa? We love the Springboks, and we love Bafana when they're winning. Sometimes. And that's because they remind us of what we're capable of. We all know that as South Africans, we are incredible people. There's so many of us that really could be doing a lot of these jobs. But we really have forgotten that when it comes to the leaders. And we're never going to have good leaders if we don't have the kind of people that understand how to elect good leaders. And so I'd like us to rethink our politics and not just judge them, especially the next panel that's coming, about what they say or their manifestos solely alone, but also about what we're prepared to do to help them. And not just political parties, but the many civic society organizations that are doing this great work. There are many alarmists that are saying that this is the last election. South Africa cannot go on. We're a done deal. Our ratings agencies have put us in the gray. But I think that's wrong. I think that's bullshit. Because, have you met us? There's a reason why we have so many digital nomads, particularly in Cape Town. This is the greatest country in the world, and we have to fight for it. We are the descendants of the first human beings. We literally live in the cradle of humankind. We will not be told that this country is not going to work. We will decide what happens on this land that our ancestors have left for us. And I know we're all tired. I know we are all overwhelmed by the amount of bad news that we hear on a day-to-day basis, including from the Daily Maverick. But we don't have the luxury of opting out of politics. We don't have the luxury of saying that we're tired. There's a movie called Interstellar that I really, really like a quote from. There's a scientist who's helping to build a spaceship that's going to go to colonize some other world because Earth is no longer a place where people can live. And he knows fundamentally that the people that are building it and that are a part of it are not the ones that are going to actually be on it to go to the next world. And somebody asks him why he continues to lie to tell people that it's a possibility that we all can get on it. And he says that it's because nobody would be willing to work and strive and build something that they themselves could not benefit from. And that might be a little bit true sometimes. But I'd like to believe that in this country, with everything that's happened, that we are willing to sacrifice, as many of our ancestors did, that we are willing to commit class suicide, if needs be, to make sure that it's not just for us, but it's for the people that are coming after us. And if there's no other reason that people believe that they should vote or that they should be involved civically, at the very least, they should think about those that don't have a voice, particularly our children, who will still be here afterwards. And so, as I say, I know that we're tired and that we'd rather be cycling or biking or brunching. But I'd like to say that I think as South Africans, with our history behind us, we can't stop because we're tired. We can only stop when we're done. And now we know what our politicians are going to do and say, and I'd like us to think very carefully about what it is that we are prepared to do leaving the Daily Maverick gathering after the 29th of May, even if everything goes to shit. What we are prepared to do, particularly to make sure that our politicians know that we are going to hold them accountable and that we are going to make sure that they create the kind of country that we all know deep down we deserve and we can have if we just had the right leadership. We've got to stay on their necks. We've got to make sure that they listen to us. And that starts by all of you not thinking that you're going to change the macroeconomic policies of South Africa. Go and meet your ward councillor. Go to a council meeting. Go to a town hall. GWC just launched its observer portal yesterday. Please sign up to be an observer. Don't be a passive recipient of democracy where you just vote. Give 3 hours of your time and voting day to protect your democracy actively. There are so many things that we need to be doing. We need to start changing the culture of how we see ourselves as citizens in this country, because if we don't, we're going to wake up on the 29th and thereafter, and we're going to wonder why we are led by idiots. Thank you.